A lot of you hit up the comments after my Titan Noir Max review asking one specific question. What happens when you pair this projector with a dedicated madVR processor? Is the built-in tone mapping enough? Or are you leaving dynamic range, highlight detail, and accurate color on the table? Today we're doing a frame-by-frame deep dive to see if adding madVR solves the Titan's biggest tone mapping limits, or if it introduces new trade-offs you need to know about before buying. First up is Denis Villeneuve's epic sci-fi masterpiece, DUNE Part 2. This film serves as the ultimate benchmark for shadow detail, dynamic contrast, and extreme highlight roll-off. From the shadowy, intimate frame and cavern assemblies to the stark, high-contrast monochrome arena sequence of Getty Prime. In this segment, we'll analyze how madVR's real-time dynamic tone mapping holds reference-level black depth and preserves delicate robe textures, and later in this video, I'll also be testing the heavy resolution and grain trade-offs when activating Anti RBE processing. This frame from DUNE Part 2 shows the Fremen gathered in the cavernous assembly hall, where harsh overhead light beams cut through deep shadows to highlight seated elders and warriors in traditional robes. HDR scenes with localized intense light sources present a huge hurdle for projectors. Standard processors often struggle to balance blinding highlights against dark surroundings without blowing out bright areas or dimming the rest of the image. madVR's dynamic tone mapping preserves micro detail in the brightest parts of the frame. The white and light colored robes retain their natural woven texture, fabric folds, and delicate tonal gradations under direct light spot. In the top image, the shadowy features seated around the illuminated center maintain rich, ink-like black levels. The contrast between the brightly lit figures and the dark cavern floor feels dramatic and grounded, exactly as Denis Villeneuve intended. Rather than pushing bright areas beyond the display's native capabilities, madVR cleanly rolls off peak highlights. This presents harsh clipping and ensures that skin tones and light fabrics look natural rather than harsh or overexposed. In standard Filmmaker Mode, the projector's static tone curve attempts to boost overall image luminance. As a result, the white attire worn by the Fremen in the center and back becomes drastically overbrightened and harshly blown out. Because Filmmaker Mode pushes the highlight levels too high, fine details within the white garments are clipped away. The intricate folds, shadows, and subtle textures of the clothing get merged into flat, glowing white patches. The overbrightening isn't limited to the robes. The surrounding sand floor and midtones in the lower frame are artificially lifted. This reduces the scene's dynamic range, making the floor look pale and washing out subtle surface textures. This side-by-side comparison captures Paul Atreides' explosive Fremen War Council speech in DUNE Part 2, a pivotal scene designed with heavy shadows and high-intensity contrast to mirror the dramatic narrative shift. madVR's real-time algorithm analyzes the precise brightness distribution of each frame. It accurately calculates shadow depth and highlight roll-off, delivering the exact artistic intent envisioned by director Denis Villeneuve and cinematographer Greg Fraser. In the top image, Paul's face retains dramatic shadow placement. The deep black levels around his eyes, jawline, and background maintain deep, punchy contrast without crushing shadow details or artificially boosting midtones. The subtle backlight behind Paul remains tightly controlled in the top frame. Highlight transitions are smooth and natural, preserving the tense, subterranean atmosphere of the Fremen cavern. In the bottom image, Filmmaker Mode overcompensates for the scene's low light by lifting overall frame luminance. This brightens the entire shot excessively, turning atmospheric dark shadows into pale, muted grays. By prematurely boosting the midtone brightness on Paul's face and torso, the lower image loses critical visual depth. For home theater enthusiasts, this comparison illustrates why dedicated hardware processing is critical for HDR projection. Standard TV and projector modes use static tone curves that sacrifice black level accuracy, whereas madVR locks in proper target luminance, or nits, and gamma tracking per frame. RBE, or rainbow effect, occurs primarily on single-chip DLP projectors because color is displayed sequentially, red, green, blue, in rapid succession, rather than simultaneously. And when bright objects move quickly across dark backgrounds, your eyes track the motion faster than the projector can flash the individual colors, causing you to see brief flashes or trails of red, green, and blue. The extreme contrast between pure whites and deep shadows, combined with sudden motion and energy shield pulses, makes color sequential artifacts instantly noticeable whenever your eye shifts across the screen. In the top image with standard playback, the image retains full native pixel integrity, micro contrast, and visual crispness. Look closely at Fade Rautha. His skin texture, edge definition, and background details are sharp and well defined because no heavy video filtering is altering the raw signal. But here's the visual downside of RBE. The top image reveals vivid multicolored RGB color separation, red, green, and blue halos, trailing behind the motion of the combatants. Even though the scene is supposed to be purely black and white, single chip display timing causes primary colors to split across high-speed motion paths. In the bottom image, which is the Anti RBE, chromatic artifacts are completely scrubbed. The distracting primary color trails disappear entirely, yielding a clean, visually coherent black and white image that honors the director's intended monochrome palette without color bleed. But here's the catch: heavy luminance, noise, and grain. The heavy subframe processing required to defeat RBE introduces a distinct compromise. Looking at the bottom image, the white floor and background walls exhibit a coarse layer of digital luminance, noise, and visible static grain that wasn't present in the clean presentation above. In addition to increased grain, Anti-RBE processing reduces overall image punch and high-frequency edge definition. The crisp outlines of the characters become noticeably softer, fine facial textures lose definition, and motion blur appears smeary rather than razor-sharp. This comparison illustrates the classic projector trade-off. Enthusiasts must choose between maximum image purity, dynamic range and sharpness, tolerating potential sensitivity to rainbow flashes, or visual comfort and artifact elimination, accepting higher signal noise and reduced fine detail. In the top image, the dense arena crowd in DUNE 2 maintains crisp spatial frequency and pixel level clarity, allowing individual spectators to stand out distinctly. Denis Villeneuve and cinematographer Greg Fraser crafted this high contrast monochrome sequence to emphasize scale and sharp architectural geometry, which standard playback reproduces faithfully. Looking at the bottom image, the aggressive processing introduces heavy luminance noise and digital grain across the crowd tiers, noticeably mudding high-frequency detail. So instead of distinct individuals, the spectators in the lower frame dissolve into a smudgy, noisy texture where individual figures bleed together and lose resolution. The deep shadow gradients spanning the stands suffer from elevated static noise, filling dark pockets with unnatural grain instead of smooth, deep blacks. And defeating rainbow effects requires dynamic subframe modulation, which unfortunately trades native picture sharpness for motion artifaction reduction. Videophiles will immediately notice that Anti-RBE reduces effective visual resolution, rendering a complex 4K wide shot looking more like a compressed 1080p stream. But if you turn Anti-RBE on to stop seeing rainbow flashes during motion, wide shots of massive crowds will look soft, fuzzy, and visually cluttered instead of razor sharp. In the top image, fade Routha's skin tones and background brightness reflect a cool, high-contrast monochrome profile with clean midtones, crisp edge definition, and precise native gamma curves. Medium close-ups featuring pale flesh tones set against dynamic background textures make subtle processing artifacts and color shifts instantly apparent to sensitive eyes. And looking closely at the bottom image, activating Anti-RBE introduces an inaccurate, warm magenta sepia color cast across the entire frame. The neutral black and white presentation loses its director-intended cool hue accuracy, resulting in skewed white balance and shifted color temperature. This video is brought to you by Jared's Workshop. If you've got a business and a website, app, or automation idea sitting in your Notes app collecting dust, Jared can actually build it. Real custom code, not a template. And he works in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. If you've been hunting for someone to finally tackle that project you keep talking about, this is your sign. Free consultation, fair pricing, links below. Check out Jared's Workshop. Next, we shift gears to the high-energy, fast-paced spectacle of Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Animated and CGI-heavy blockbusters like this push color volume to its absolute limits, forcing display processors to balance intense peak brightness against deep color saturation. We'll be comparing how madVR cleanly renders vibrant energy auras, specular highlights on the floating chaos emeralds, and rich fabric tones without oversaturating the primary red channels into blown-out, featureless glares. This scene from Sonic the Hedgehog 3 features Dr. Robotnik and Gerald Robotnik overlooking Earth from orbit, wearing vibrant red and white suits framed against the bright blue curve of the planet. madVR's real-time dynamic tone mapping correctly maps wide color gamut, or BT 2020 data, into the projector's physical capabilities, ensuring primary colors remain rich, deep, and within proper saturation limits. In the top image, Dr. Robotnik's red coat retains its subtle shading, fabric textures, and realistic shadow contours. The red hue looks rich and organic rather than artificially pushed or glowing. The adjacent white suit, bald heads, and earth backdrop maintain clean highlight separation and natural blue hues, creating a balanced, high-contrast composition that preserves accurate color relationships across the frame. In the standard filmmaker mode, the projector's static tone curve pushes color luminance too hard in an attempt to make the image pop, resulting in severe oversaturation of the red primary channel. Looking closely at the bottom image, the red coat becomes artificially brightened, vivid, and oversaturated to the point of color clipping. The subtle fabric folds, shadows, and fine material textures on the red suit are flattened into an overly intense neon red blob. The excessive red saturation bleeds into adjacent highlights, giving surrounding areas including the collars, skin tones, and white suit accents an unnatural pinkish tint that skews the overall color temperature away from accurate presentation. Unlike monochrome cinema, fast-paced animated scenes like this mid-air clash between Sonic and Shadow in Sonic the Hedgehog 3 push display engines with extreme color volume, high peak brightness, and multiple concentrated light sources simultaneously. The madVR's real-time dynamic tone mapping analyzes the intense brightness spikes from Sonic's blue aura, Shadow's flaming energy, and the floating chaos emeralds, balancing peak specular highlights against the dark volcanic backdrop. In the top image, each individual chaos emerald in the center retains its distinct color saturation: red, purple, green, yellow, and blue, and physical gem facets. Specular highlights remain tight and contained without bleeding into adjacent pixels. Sonic's blue energy trail and Shadow's fiery orange-red glow maintain deep, vivid hue purity under madVR. The transition from intense core light to surrounding atmosphere rolls off smoothly, preserving distinct color gradations rather than turning into harsh white glare. The dark mountain ridges and glowing lava channels beneath the characters retain deep black levels and rich contrast in the top frame. This preserves spatial depth, giving the entire fiery sky real visual dimension. Standard filmmaker mode relies on a static HDR tone curve that overcompensates when processing high luminance effects. In the bottom image, overall brightness is boosted indiscriminately, pushing specular highlights past the display's clipping threshold. The intense brightness completely blows out the floating chaos emeralds. The individual gem colors lose saturation and wash out into a bright white, featureless glow, masking the fine facet details. Filmmaker mode prematurely lifts midtone gamma, causing the dark volcanic landscape, clouds, and shadows to look pale and hazy. The dramatic sense of depth is flattened into a washed-out image with reduced dynamic range. Finally, we put the XGIMI Titan Noir Max through a stress test with the neon-infused world of TRON Ares. Characterized by harsh primary lighting, razor-sharp digital grids, and deep black backgrounds, the sci-fi environment quickly exposes the limits of static HDR tone curves. In this comparison, we'll look at how madVR maintains dark suit contours and subtle facial shading under intense red ambient light, whereas standard filmmaker mode overcompensates by lifting global brightness and washing out the atmosphere. This low-angle shot from TRON Ares features Athena framed against an intense neon red grid atmosphere, showcasing high contrast lighting and complex digital suit details. TRON visual aesthetics heavily rely on vibrant primary illumination set against deep dark backgrounds. Processing pure red primary lighting without clipping or crushing shadow detail is one of the toughest challenges for projector tone mapping. madVR's real-time dynamic tone mapping calculates the high contrast scene frame by frame. It keeps the dark suit contours deep and punchy while simultaneously preserving detail in the character's face and the bright background grid. In the top frame, Athena's face retains realistic shading, skin texture, and sharp jawline definition despite being surrounded by blinding red ambient light. The highlights on her forehead and nose roll off smoothly without washing out in flat pink patches. The suit material maintains rich, deep black levels, while the red circuit lines glow cleanly along her shoulders, and the dark suit doesn't get artificially lifted into gray, preserving the contrast envisioned by the filmmakers. Standard filmmaker mode utilizes a static HDR tone curve that boosts overall image luminance. In the bottom image, the background lighting is lifted excessively, turning a dark, moody digital environment into an overbrightened pinkish red space. Because filmmaker mode overcompensates for the low average picture level, or APL, the dark areas of Athena's suit lose their ink-like depth. The suit's chest and shoulders look pale and washed out, reducing overall dynamic punch. The bright background structures behind the character lose edge sharpness and micro contrast in the lower frame. The elevated luminance causes the subtle grit textures to blend together, creating a hazy, overexposed background glow. Basically, madVR keeps dark scenes atmospheric and punchy with realistic skin shading and deep black suits, while standard Filmmaker Mode turns up the overall brightness too high, making the background look washed out red and erasing the moody sci-fi contrast. To wrap things up, pairing the XGIMI Titan Noir Max with the madVR Envy video processor is nothing short of a game changer. The Titan Noir Max brings incredible raw power to the table with its massive laser brightness and ultra-wide color spectrum. But as you've seen, raw power without precise control can lead to overbrightened scenes, blown out highlights, lifted shadow levels, and clipped primary colors when relying solely on standard Filmmaker Mode. However, when it comes to Anti RBE technology, you will definitely want to think twice before toggling it on or off. While Anti RBE effectively scrubs rainbow motion artifacts, it introduces a significant visual penalty. As seen in the DUNE 2 arena battle and crowd shots, activating Anti RBE adds heavy digital luminance noise and static grain. It softens razor-sharp edge contrast, shifts color temperature accuracy, and blends fine high-frequency details, turning a crisp native 4K crowd shot into a noisy, smudgy image. So unless you're exceptionally sensitive to rainbow flashes, keeping Anti RBE off preserves the Titan's pristine optical sharpness, native resolution, and micro contrast. Combined with the madVR's tone mapping, you get the absolute best image possible on a single chip DLP display. Breathtaking contrast, reference color accuracy, and stunning razor-sharp detail. But now it's your turn. I want to know your thoughts down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss more content just like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.